Call the meeting to order, and let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We have a motion to approve the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Is there support?
Support.
Thank you. Julie?
Ms. Burchard?
Yes.
Mr. Butke?
Yes.
Mr. Dracos?
Yes.
Ms. McQuiston?
Yes.
Mr. Singer?
Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Weedman?
Yes. Motion to approve the agenda passes. We'll move on to communication update. Mark?
Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you.
Basically, most of the things that are happening are related to the beginning of school, working a lot with all the different departments on different messaging to our community, working with teaching and learning. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on there, working with food service based on what we're going to do to help get the messages out with that, working with human resources for the employment and with the staff. So we're just kind of working even working with Mr. Bell on some projects as well for the website. So, I think doing a lot of different things, and that's kind of our focus. Once we get into school, we'll be in more normal routine with, the magazine and the TV shows and stuff like that. But for the most part right now, it's just kind of the getting ready for school issues. Any questions?
Any questions for Mark?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on. Presentation tonight, and Chris, you're going to share some information with us, please.
I am. Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be with you guys. At watching the last board meeting, you had mentioned that you wanted an update on our process and how we're doing with screening our athletes, and that's my goal tonight, is just to explain to you in much, go as in depth as you would like me to, in regards to the process we use to screen our athletes to try to ensure that they're safe and able to go about their activities. Before I begin, I do have to acknowledge and thank Rick Arnett, Mark Snyder, and Shannon Lewis, because they've been instrumental in helping us come up with a safe and effective process and establish our protocols. And they've been great to lean on whenever we have questions, especially Rick. He's a great resource for us. And I think what we have is it's been successful. We've got everybody on board, and I'll go through it. I'd also like to recognize our athletes and our coaches, because, we've been doing this now for about 8 weeks, and I think it's been pretty successful, but we needed a commitment from our coaching staff and the student athletes to do things right. And they've really done that. So I'll walk through our process. I'll try to keep it as basic as possible. Please interrupt me if you have questions, or at the end, if you want to ask questions, on different scenarios, be happy to take those as well. And if I don't know the answer, I'll gladly defer to Rick, because he'll have the answer. But, before an activity takes place, and whether that be marching band, whether it be any of our athletic activities, we have a district form that the person in charge has to fill out, which basically goes through their process and their procedures, embracing all of the safety protocols that we have in place. So they have to turn that in to myself, and I will review it before I send it down to central office to get that activity approved. Once that's approved, we've had to go through the process of registering all of our student athletes with the Clear to Go website, and all of the student athletes have a Clear to Go app. And I don't know, board members, if you have that app as well, but we have it here to enter our buildings. And it basically goes through all the common pre-COVID screening questions, such as asking about a fever, cough, sore throat, shortness of breath. Have we been exposed to anybody who's been COVID positive? And it's a way to screen all of our athletes. So every morning that there's an activity in our student, I say athletes with marching band as well, before they report to that activity, they have to go on, use their cell phones, and they have to go on and answer those screening questions. And once those questions once they answer those questions, they then receive it looks like a badge on their phone, and they can show up to that activity, and they can check in using that badge. Now, upon check-in, our coaches have a process in place where the student athlete shows up with the mask on. They have usually there's a clearly marked line to ensure social distancing. They come through, they present the badge. Once they have the badge, we then use thermometers to take their temperature. Once they pass the temperature check, they then pass on to the head coach who checks them in, again, using the Clear to Go system. So we have a spreadsheet that checks in and keeps track of all the athletes that participated in that activity that day. If they do not pass, let's say, for example, they weren't feeling well or they had a sore throat or a cough or even a fever, then they don't get the badge. And if they don't get the badge, they don't show up to that activity. If they have an issue, a technology issue, we also have a pencil paper backup system we use that was given to us by the MHSAA. So we're able to document all the participants that we have in that activity. Upon check-in, as I said, they have to go through, they have to get a temperature check. And the temperature check calls for a temperature of 100.3 degrees or less. And then they go through, and once they pass that, they're approved. If we have an athlete that fails the screening process, number one, they wouldn't show up to that activity, or if they fail on site, we automatically defer that issue to our trainers or to myself. We may have the coach reach out to confirm that there is an issue and not a mistake, which sometimes happens. Sometimes the kids go through and they're pushing buttons really fast and make a mistake, and we got to go back and reset that for them. But if there is an issue, the coaches then pass along to our training staff and to myself. And from there, we'll make a decision as to what it is. If a student wasn't feeling well that day, when they're feeling better, they are allowed to participate. If there were consistent symptoms, then we would isolate that athlete for a period of time as well. We have a protocol in terms of, I'm going to show this to you, and I'm sure you guys have seen this, and this is online. There's a set process that we follow for temperature screenings as well as the COVID tests in terms of if we had somebody who did test positive. And I will go through that here in a second. In terms of when they report to the site, standard protocols, mask on coming in, mask on going out. We encourage all our student athletes to bring their own hand sanitizer. They have to bring their own water source. They have to come dressed for the practice or activity. We do not use locker rooms. We do have a restroom here on site outside, obviously, where the concession stands are, that is open to our athletes, and that is cleaned a couple times a day. And then once they're there, they are to socially distance until the coach calls them together and gives them further instructions, and they begin the practice or the activity. On top of all of that, for our specific sports, the MHSAA also has about a 12-page document that they provide for us as well that gives us additional protocols that we have to adopt per sport. And they're all sports specific, so we have to go through that as well. Our league has also adopted a OAA safe competition agreement, which our coaches have to sign off on, which also ensures that when we begin competition that we are screening our athletes and we're following all the safety protocols. It's just another step that the league has in place to ensure safety for our athletes. To keep track of all of this on Microsoft Teams, I believe it is, we have a spreadsheet that we keep where we're able to track any possible case with any of our athletes. From somebody not feeling well to an exposure issue to if we had a positive case. So we can track it, document it, and we share that among our trainers, myself, and our high school administration, so everybody is aware exactly of where we are with those cases. If we have a positive case, obviously, if we have positive cases, that person, we shut that person down for 14 days. Our coaches do a good job of trying to group our student athletes and have them work in small groups. For example, in cross country, for example, they may run in groups of 7 to 8 on a 60-man team. So they're not all running together. So if we have an athlete who tests positive, we'll shut that athlete down. If we have 2 in a group that test positive, we shut the group down. If we can't identify a group, we'll shut the whole team down. If it's an exposure case, direct exposure, well, we isolate that athlete for 14 days. And that 14 days is consistent with the CDC recommendations to ensure that that student athlete is not demonstrating any symptoms. If we do have any positive cases, all positive cases are reported to the Oakland County Health Division. And, from there, they'll ask some questions. If they have to do some tracking, they'll let us know. But they also work with us in terms of advising us on how to handle certain situations, and we follow their lead. Thus far, we have, I checked today, we have over 1,100 athletes registered in the Clear to Go system. We've been using this for 8 weeks, and I think it's been very successful. We've had, throughout the 8 weeks, we have had 3 positive cases of students who have tested positive for COVID. And all of those happened early on when we started practice, and the exposures came to situations outside of our athletic teams. It didn't happen then when they were with us. They were exposed. But fortunately, we were able to isolate them, and we have not seen it spread throughout our teams or marching band or our groups. Same thing with exposure issues. The kids are really good about, usually it's a family member, or they were at a social event and they found out somebody tested positive, and we've been able to isolate those athletes as well. And so we have not had issues spreading to the rest of our student athletes. It's been a safe process for us. And that's our goal, obviously, is to keep our student athletes as safe as possible. So it's been effective. And it's a lot for our coaches and the student athletes, but their commitment to it has made it successful. So I feel good about where we are. And as we keep going, I'll be honest, I really feel that, I commend you, the Board of Education, for encouraging the students in student activities to be allowed to run, because I really think that we're providing a safe atmosphere and a safe alternative for our students, our student athletes. And we all know, as much as we love teenagers with idle time, they're into everything under the sun. When they've got something positive to belong to and a reason to, follow protocols and keep themselves safe, I think we found that it's been effective. So, that's where I know I went through it very fast. I'm sure you have questions, so please fire away.
Questions for Chris. Thank you, Chris. That was helpful. Yes, Nate.
Yeah, Chris, more of a comment and a compliment. In a self-reporting system, there's a real temptation for people to report in ways that are favorable to them. And having a chance to talk to a number of student athletes just in our small circle, I've been really impressed that they feel like they're in a culture where they're watching out for each other, and they have the comfort to say, if you're not feeling well, that's okay. And I'd imagine that's really hard if you're a kid, because you could potentially be pulling yourself out of something that you want to do. And across the board with the kids that I've talked to, they've all haven't felt that pressure to not report what's going on the Clear to Go app on it. And that doesn't happen by itself. So clearly there's coaches and other folks who are running the program that are role modeling it. And I've got a small sample group, but I've been really impressed by the fact that they take accountability to say, hey, we got to watch out for each other, where I would imagine there's a real temptation if you're that student to, maybe not do that. So that doesn't happen by accident, and it's clearly happening in a positive way. So compliments for creating the right culture for people to self-report and take responsibility to watch out for themselves and others.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's as you said, it comes down to the coaches and the athletes themselves. We go back to the old days when if you weren't feeling well, you just wanted to tough it out and get through it. And we've had to change our thinking, and we encourage the kids, if they're not feeling well, stay home, and they're doing it for the betterment of themselves, their team. They don't want to be the one to get their team shut down. So they're really taking it seriously. They're looking out for each other, and and this doesn't just obviously this is a new normal. And not just for COVID situations, but when we get into the flu season and all those other things, this is a new normal about taking care of yourself and taking care of your teammates. So I appreciate you recognizing that.
Thank you, Chris. Mary Jo.
Chris, I apologize. I know you mentioned this number and I didn't get to write it down. How many students are in activities at the high school that you oversee right now?
Well, right now, registered in Clear to Go, we have over 1,100 students.
Okay.
Now, a few of those are from community education and their camps that they run. There's a large population from marching band. And then, we have 600 to 700 student athletes participating. So altogether, we're working with over 1,100 students and student athletes.
Great, thank you. So the next part of my question is for Ben. Ben, I'm guessing that we can use this data and the procedures that Chris and the group are using to kind of help flesh out what we can do moving forward in terms of the possibility of opening up school for the second semester or the second quarter, excuse me.
Yes, you're exactly right. This is a great opportunity, and the other groups that we'll have going into the schools, they all will be great sources of data. And Chris and his department certainly has been great for us to look at that, as well as in our enrichment services with our summer programs. We've been able to take a look at how they have been successful as well. So I went out and watched, the athletic practices when I first started in the district, and I was very impressed with, specifically when you look at football, which has a large number of participants, student athletes. I was really impressed with how they were able to go from station to station and legitimately keep their space, and the coaches they didn't know who I was, but the coaches were doing what they needed to do because it was the right thing to do, not because somebody was watching. So, but that's a great example of how we can get through this and how we can get kids back into school to do the right things when we need to.
Thanks
Other
for your
questions?
presentation, Chris.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mary Jo.
I just wanted to say thank you to Chris for the presentation. It was very helpful.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Yes, Birgit.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
You referred to the MHSAA. I think you said it's a 12-page document that gave you the guidelines for not you, all school districts guidelines, and you said they're sports specific. So what does this mean going forward for you? This is working really well right now as we are in the summer and the fall. What does it mean farther into the school season?
Well, and it's a great question. The MHSAA right now, I mean, we're full go for golf, tennis, and cross country. Those sports right now are full go. We're waiting on the green light to be able to compete for soccer. Our soccer teams are practicing, but we don't have the green light yet to play games. And we're waiting for the governor to open up our gyms for volleyball and allow our kids to come inside to swim. So that's where we are there. And then when it comes down to their document, they have specific per sport guidelines. For example, I've pulled volleyball out as an example. Volleyball talks about no pregame and postgame handshakes, high fives, or fist bumps. They recommend also on the bench that you don't have a traditional bench. If you watch any of the NBA games right now, their benches are all spread out. So they either stand in social distance or you set up a bench like that. They talk about a 3-ball rotation and who's allowed to touch the ball, and the ball has to be sanitized. They recommend face coverings during the captain's meeting. Each school bringing their own towels so they can wipe sweat off the floor. Volleyball not changing sides like you're customary to seeing. Your side is your side. So every sport has those type of nuances where they're adjusting rules. Golf, for example, in our OAA competitions, usually when you have a golf match, you pair up with other schools and other teams. Right now in the OAA, we're having our schools play with each other. So the teams aren't crossing to minimize that as much as possible. So it's those type of things per sport. Every sport's a little bit different.
And can you also touch on, will this impact or how does this impact middle school with any of the sports that they have going?
Well, yeah, middle school, great question. Football season has been moved to the spring for all football in Michigan. So it's going to be a little crazy making that work, but we think we can pull that off. we're committed to trying to offer middle school football during that spring window as well. We think we can do that and give them an experience as well. But middle school sports, we have middle school cross country, and we are expecting those numbers to be pretty large this year because, for the boys, that's their only alternative this fall.
Right.
And then we have middle school girls basketball, which runs in the fall. So again, as soon as the gyms are open, we're ready to go forward with middle school girls basketball.
Is there mountain biking still going on at this season?
Yes, and mountain biking, yes, and that's a K through 12 program. Nick Shaskos does a great job with our mountain bikers, and they've been going, and they've got about 80 members on their team, and that's they start in the middle of the summer, and they've been and Nick and his staff have been using these protocols, and they're part of our group, and they've been going as well. Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Jake, you had a question?
Yes, hey, thanks for your presentation, Chris. One question I have left unanswered, the need for testing, or what causes the requirement? So we had some students test positive. I'm sure we've had some students test negative. Is there any mandate that can be put upon a student to get tested, and are there any resources like through the health department because of cost of being tested for uninsured or underinsured students? So how does the whole testing work?
Well, I'll start, and then I'm going to pass this off to Rick as well, because I'm sure he's going to have some things to add. In terms of testing, the natural reaction of anybody who has been close to anybody maybe associated with COVID is just to run your clinic and get tested. And when we talk to the health department, that's not what they recommend. They recommend it's a 14-day quarantine period, and you get tested when you're starting to show symptoms. Now, whenever there's a situation where a team member has tested positive, or we have an exposure situation, we send letters out to those teams, the parents, so we inform them with as much information as we can, while still trying to protect the privacy of the individual who may have been exposed or had tested positive. And with that, we always include the contacts where they can get free testing through the health department, phone numbers who they can call, and we try to give them as much information as possible. But we don't mandate testing, and Rick can take that from there as to why we don't mandate testing, but we do mandate the 14-day time period. Rick, I'll hand it off to you.
Gee, thanks. Chris, I think you covered it well. And I guess from a legal standpoint, we'd be walking on some difficult ground, if you would, if we required testing. And the CDC as well, we utilize their guidelines. And as Chris said, the immediate reaction is to run out and get tested, when truly the testing is a snapshot in time, and the incubation period and the time in which you can become contagious varies in individuals. So you may test negative a day after exposure, but through incubation, you don't become contagious for 3 days. So you get this false sense of hope or false sense of security that you're negative. So yeah, we don't require any testing, but we provide, as Chris said, all of the resources for individuals if they feel the need to go out, once again, for the comfort level. So I hope that answers your question, Jake.
It does. I mean, that helps to understand, to say, hey, that going back to what you talked about, the team mentality, I really appreciated that answer. And that's where the student says, hey, you quarantine and just, there's a protocol, and it's in testing, like you said, Chris, running out and getting tested doesn't necessarily help anything. If you're going to be quarantined, you can wait it out and see if you have symptoms.
Right. We've learned a lot with, especially the rapid tests. How reliable are the rapid tests? It depends on what report you read. So again, we don't want to give people recommendations as to what tests they should get or that they need to get tested. We just follow the CDC guidelines with time and provide them resources if they want to get tested. The great thing about our parents and families, I will say, those that do go out and get tested, they're very happy to report back. They share information. which is helpful. So, it's nice that everybody's in this thing together. Our goal is to keep the kids safe and have safe activities for them.
And
Great.
if I could, Jim, I want to add a few more
Sure.
things.
Absolutely.
First off, again, I know Chris had already mentioned Mark and Shannon, but I want to mention Mark again and thank him for helping us craft the standard letters that we can provide to the sponsors of any of these events, and Chris for helping us work through those early on and kind of getting the letters right so that we have, the right amount of information, the resources available to them, and doing it in such a way that we protect as much as we can the identity, if you would, of any individuals, and providing them with enough resources so that they can make an informed decision. Once again, it's not us to decide for them, but we want to help them have all the information available so that they can make an informed decision. And again, Mark's been instrumental in helping us create those. But I want to step back and really thank Chris to start with, going back 12 weeks or so ago, maybe even 13, when this idea came to me, and getting a presentation from Scott Garrison, who at the time I had no clue. Scott was actually a community member and has children who have been through our district and one currently in our district. He just happens to be a software developer, and his company anyway. And after listening to him, thinking about it and going to Chris and saying, hey, I'd really love to maybe try to give this a shot with you and your athletes as kind of a trial period and see if this is something we think we could expand upon, because there's a good chance if and when we go back to school to in-person instruction, we're going to have to do some screening. So I thank Chris for being very open-minded about it and really helping us work with Scott on the development of this software. And I know we've talked about this before, that we've been on the front lines helping with the development of this through the Clear to Go app. Some of the changes that through working with Chris and his athletes that we will see in the very near future, we intended to have this rolled out in time for school to start. There's a lot of other aspects of this that we had to kind of iron out and figure out. Families, for instance. How do multiple people in one family work under one account? So if I have children in different grade levels and my elementary child doesn't have a phone to take with them, how can we work that out? So Clear to Go, we've been working with them. We'll be launching a newer version of this in the not too distant future that'll address family situations. We even have some employees who have children in the district, how that will work. We have solutions for those individuals who don't have a smartphone and are going to show up at a building where they could have screened at home, and we'll have individuals with iPads at the entrance that can look them up by name and verify that the screening had taken place. One of the things we'll be doing with all of our families, we didn't do with the athletes, but we will do here in the, when we get children back in, is sending to all of the parents a form that they will complete, and they can allow for their children to screen themselves, or they want to be the ones that do the actual screening. So, elementary, once again, throws in a different dynamic for younger children and how we handle that. So I really thank Clear to Go for, working with us and trying to meet all of our needs. So you'll see a new rollout. Some of you that have used the app, you'll notice that the questions have varied the last couple of weeks. We had a lot of questions about what happens when the allergy season comes around, and I can't answer no, because I do have a scratchy throat, but I know it's because I have hay fever. So we've changed the wording to indicate that it's a unusual cough that's not associated with a known medical condition like allergies or so forth, to help people, screen more appropriately. We launched it with some of our staff, and we've learned a few things with our staff. With students and student athletes, those kids show the badge when they go to their event, whether it's practice or whatever. With staff, we don't have that actual checks and balances. It's kind of on an honor system. And I'll be the first to tell you, I've been in the office now for the better part of the last month and a half, And there have been many times where I make it to the office, I sit down, I start working, and the first thing I go, oh my God, I forgot to do clear to go. So I do it an hour in or something. I'll be the first to admit. And so we've worked with clear to go. And as of this morning, now we are sending out push notifications every day. So you get a reminder at 6:30 that says, if you plan to go into a building, don't forget to do your clear to go. And there was a catchy little motivational saying. I can't remember what it was this morning. If one of you might recall, Ben, you got a smile. I think maybe, do you recall what it was? I thought it was kind of cool that they put this little motivational thing in there.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was, but it was
Something
it was
to have a good day kind of
yeah,
thing.
It was
So,
amusing.
yeah, it was. And in our
I can
leadership,
quote it for you, Rick.
what's that?
I'll quote it for you.
All right.
It starts with, good morning. The grass is green. It's time to screen for Lake Orion Community Schools. Comes at 6:30 in the morning, and I don't get up to 6:45.
But, you know, I polled our leadership yesterday and really said, hey, be honest with me. How many of you have gone in and forgot? And the vast majority of us have raised our hands. So all of our adults and students down the road will be getting a push notification just as a reminder. But again, we have a checks and balances for the students, not so much with the staff, when we'd like to think that we don't need to get to that point with the staff. But this is going to be a good reminder, and it will be a helpful reminder. The other thing Chris alluded to a little bit is the tracking. When we have an exposure issue or when we have a positive case, the system is set up in such a way that we can actually manage that case. So we can put in the date on which they had the exposure, and the system will tell us when their 14-day quarantine period is up, so that a coach doesn't have to try to remember, or a teacher or someone, hey, the kid was quarantined. What day was that again, or how long ago? The system tracks that and says they're available to return on this date. The same thing with positive cases. So not only is it a screening, but it's also a tracking system for us as well, which kind of goes to Mary Jo's question earlier. Will this help us down the road in tracking? And if there's ever a need for us to justify or verify the testing and the tracking and so forth, we've got a record of that. So we've been real pleased with it. I know that many other districts in the area have opted to utilize this software as well. I've gotten several calls from many of them for references and so forth. So we're happy with it. Any other questions about some of the updates? I'd be happy to answer. Or
Other
continuing.
questions? Yes, Jake.
You just to build on what you were just talking about, would it be possible to do contact tracing? So as Chris talked about, there's cohort groups. Is that the data that you're getting out of the app as well, to say, we know if we had a student that reported symptoms and was eventually positive, the coach would then know? Does the system track that? Do we go to that level, Chris, of tracking the cohorts?
That's up to the coach.
Okay.
You know, if we have a situation where there was an exposure issue, you know, we take a look at the practice schedule for the day, what activities were the kids doing, who was together, and then we make decisions from that. And that's also where the health department has been helpful, because I have those discussions with the person at the health department, and they recommend, this was an example. There was our swim team right now is practicing at Great Lakes Athletic Club. Lake Orion, Clarkson, Oxford, all at different times are using the outdoor pool because we can't use pools. They had an employee who had tested positive. While talking with the health department, our girls were never there when that employee was on site, and where he was, there was never any crossing. So once they cleaned the facility, they gave us green light that we were good to go back. So it's a case by case basis, and the health department helps us with that.
And the health department also provides us a sample letter to send to those individuals who we believe had close contact with their actual letterhead. Kind of reiterates what we said to the families initially, but it also then provides them some resources as well.
And I'll supplement that, the health department, as part of their return to school toolkit, is going to ask every family to fill out an acknowledgement form that they won't send their children to school with known COVID-19 symptoms. So that's the strongest part that the health department is actually initiating.
You know, a key point in this process too that I think needs to be mentioned as well. If we have a situation and we communicate to families, we will have families that will be overly cautious. Even though it was not an exposure issue, they may choose, for whatever reason, that their student athlete, they want to shut them down for 14 days. And we respect that. That's a family choice. And we support that and we respect that. So we try to provide as much information as we can, but we also recognize that families sometimes want to make decisions that they feel is best for them, and that's okay.
One of the things I'd like to mention as well, Chris indicated the process for his student athletes. And when this initially hit us and we were trying to find ways to get student athletes and other students into participate in activity, the notion of temperature check was kind of at the forefront. That has changed recently, like many things with the COVID, as the science has become more and more proven and so forth. And the health department is no longer recommending the temperature check. We were scrambling 8-9 weeks ago trying to figure out when we opened how we were going to temperature check every kid that walked in the building. We were looking at infrared thermal imaging cameras that would do large groups, and those things were running $25,000, $30,000 a piece. We were going through all these different ideas on how we could do that. Well, the health department has since backed off on that. So if and when we get back into in-person instruction, we will not be doing the temperature screening of each individual when they enter the building. That'll be part of, which it currently is, the whole question prior to entering. We've continued that process with the student athletes just because we felt once we started it that way, that it made sense to see that through to the end and not make a drastic change midway through. So we continue to do that. But in the future, even Dr. Fauci came out not too long ago and kind of indicated that that's not as accurate a assessment, if you would. So I just want to put it out there for people now. When we return to in-person instruction, the actual individual temperature screening will not be a part of the process. And at some point, we may dissolve that with our student athletes, but it seems to be working at this point. So we just didn't want to deviate from what we had started with.
The other questions around this topic? I did have one question I'd like to ask. Chris, I know that when gyms reopen or venues reopen for contests, that access to those venues is going to be extremely limited as far as possibly no spectators, but if there are spectators, it'll be extremely limited. Will any of these tools or procedures be applicable to people who attend contests?
Obviously, if we have spectators at contests, we're anticipating, obviously, social distancing, rules apply, must be in masks, limited number of spectators. These are the things that are being told to us. For spectators, we're not going to be required to screen our spectators or take their temperatures. Our focus will be the kids on the field or on the gym floor or in the pool, it's not the spectators. So we will have some limitations. There will be some guidelines. We'll have signs out there and people, communicating what those are. We're still waiting to hear from the MHSAA and also from the governor once they open things up, what they will allow. Because she right now the governor is going to set the spectator requirements. For example, if pools are allowed to be open, how many people are we allowed in? That's going to come from the governor's office. So we're waiting to hear from those. The positive thing, what we're anticipating, what we've been working on is through ONTV, our own TPW studio, as well as a program known as Pixelot. We are going to attempt to live stream as many events as possible at the high school level. So if it's a freshman soccer game, hopefully that's going to be live streamed. So if grandma and grandpa can't come see it in person, they'll be able to watch it on their computer. ONTV is getting creative with even trying to figure out how to televise our cross-country meets, which if you guys know cross-country, what a challenge that is. But they're working on it. So, outside of golf, golf is just too hard to televise off-site. But outside of golf, we think we'll be able to live stream, hopefully, all the athletic events that we have. So if spectators are limited, they'll at least be able to see their children play.
That's great. Well, thank you for coming and explaining this in detail for us. I know that a few board members had asked questions about it, and I certainly had questions. And this is very helpful to know all the steps that have been taken. And it would seem like this is going to be very applicable to other cohort groups for after-school activities that even prior to resuming our time in school physically, that we could convene those groups and have some other activities that utilize these same safety measures. So I think it's terrific. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Yeah, I was going to follow up on his spectators. If we could send some sort of community communication out, because we're Dragon country, and I love going to all the. I'll stand along the fence at a tennis match or go to a soccer game. I'm a sports junkie. So if we could somehow communicate broad and wide what the restrictions are, so that we don't get people saying, "Hey, look, there's a soccer game on Thursday night, and I'm craving live sports." So that everybody knows what the situation is.
We sure will. Absolutely.
Yeah, and Jake, in terms of the communication, as you bring that up, Chris and I have talked a lot about that, and the issues keep changing with the MHSA and the governor's office in terms of restrictions and what's available, what sports are even happening. So we're just kind of waiting until there's some settle to what's defined for the fall seasons. And once we have that, Chris and I have talked, we definitely are going to communicate all those different options to the community.
Great. All right. Thank you all. That was great information. All right, we'll move on now to public participation. And I believe we have a few people sharing with us tonight. Birgit?
Yes, we do. And I just want to acknowledge and thank Mark and Julie for their work helping streamline the process that we have for public participation. There's a new way for people to link to. It makes it much easier for me to see who exactly is submitting something for public participation as opposed to a general board email, although that might be getting confused a little bit tonight, as you'll see. So we have 5 of these, and here's the first one. It's from Brian Carney. He says, "While I understand there are no good answers in these times, I'm very disappointed in this board decision in moving to remote-only school. There was a good plan in place to try to safely give kids the face-to-face learning they need. While any plan to try to live with this horrible virus has risks and downsides, there's a 100% chance of reduced learning and mental health issues for some kids in remote learning, which is why the original plan was better. It gave parents the choice for what was best for their kid. Please reconsider your vote to go back to the face-to-face option as soon as possible. Thank you for your time and service to the board." Our second submission is from Lindsay Baranowski. And she says, what measures will determine if kids will go back to in-person learning? If you could please lay out what has happened so that as a parent, I can monitor these things as well. The third submission is from Molly Curtis. And she says, why, as a taxpayer in this public school setting that is now denying my child from in-person instruction, now offering a private school rate for my child to be educated in person? This solution of the Dragon's Den is no solution for 2 working parents who cannot afford the $200 a week per child. As a taxpayer and a lifelong resident, I find this appalling and verging criminal. This is not what my taxes were approved for, and why is the federal CARES money not going to support us working parents? We have been essential workers from the beginning of this pandemic and completely left out of the conversation. And if you can do this smaller classroom setting for Dragon Den, why can this not be implemented across the district, fully knowing some parents will still choose to keep their kids home? Pipe the teachers in through Zoom if they feel unsafe, and get younger teachers' aides looking for experience to oversee these smaller classrooms. Throw us more of a lifeline. I'm frustrated as a full-time working mother that the only solution you have offered us is a paying option. It seems completely unjust and like a slap in the face to the community. Frustrated since March and doing my best. Can you please do better? The next one is from Noelle Harvey. And she says, hello board. I do have to say, I have so much respect for what you guys are doing during this time. So congrats on that. I am the mom of an incoming fourth grader. I'm only speaking for me and my thoughts for this. So I'm not saying every family or person thinks this way, but I am a bit disappointed in this new dragon den thing you have going on. Thankfully, I am able to work from home, but I know not a lot of families are able to do that. I've been in this position to where I would have to have daycare every day, especially during the summer, and even, of course, latchkey before and after school sometimes. How do you think this is affordable to families? I paid $150 a week for 10 hours, full-time daycare from 7:30 to 5:30, and you are charging over $200 a week if they are going all week for school hours, and then adding an additional cost if people have to go to work and have to drop off or pick up late. You decided at the last board meeting that we have to go virtual for the first semester. I was okay with that because my thought process was, it is what it is at this point. They will make the right decision. And it was, until this dragon den came out. You are contradicting the whole virtual learning and that you decided was the best thing, with sending kids face-to-face just to sit in front of a computer and virtual learn while being in the presence of other kids. That is okay if the parents are paying us, but you cannot send your child to school for face-to-face learning with an in-person teacher because it is not safe. That is not okay. Please either change your decision to give us, the parents, a choice on how we want to send our kids to school, or drop the price to either nothing or maybe even do a little research for the pricing on that. I will say that I think it is great that you are thinking of the families that might need daycare during this time and providing that, so high five on that. But again, the price is outrageous. I am not sure if you think you need to recoup some of the money you are spending on the devices that you are sending out, but it needs to be thought about again. Thank you and have a great night. Go Dragons. The last submission is from Kim Hubbard, and she says, are the hours set for middle school? Are the actual hours the students need to be present 9:30 to 2? Or will they be required to attend during the office hours as well? If so, what will they be doing during the office hours? Thank you. And that concludes public participation.
All right, thank you, Birgit. Thank you for the feedback from the community. Moving on to strategic area discussion items, we'll begin with governance and superintendent update. Ben?
All right, well, thank you. I have a few different items that I'm going to expand on tonight. The first one is the 90-day plan. As you know, I've been with the district a little over a month, a little over the first 30 days. During that time, obviously, there's been a lot of work that our team has accomplished and continues to work tirelessly to provide opportunities for our students. As far as the 90-day plan, I've had 51 individual meetings. Those meetings have been from 45 minutes to 2 hours. I've had the opportunity to meet with directors, cabinet members, administrators of the district, union leaders in the district, the Tri-County Alliance director, each of the board members, the reporters in the area, our diversity coordinator, our police chief, village officials, other elected officials, and on TV executive director and local librarian, as well as some community members as well. So I've really been working hard on trying to establish relationships, continuing the work that we've been doing has made our district so great, and also working to try to forge new relationships with me as part of the school district. I've had an opportunity to tour each of the buildings. Mr. Snyder has been very gracious with his time and his knowledge about the district. He has taken me around and given me inside tours. I've been able to get to some of the facilities, more than once. Certainly the bond work has taken me to a couple of them more frequently. I've been able to get acquainted with the village and the townships and so much that the community has to offer. The return to school work, the preparedness plan, the academic plan has been, incredibly intense. It's just a small portion of a transition plan for a superintendent or a 90-day plan, but that certainly has captured a lot of the time as well as it should. It's very important to everybody. The school safety and crisis management plans and the procedures and protocols, I've had the opportunity to go through those and understand those a little bit better. And we have a board workshop scheduled to discuss the expectations. And so I'm looking forward to that next month with the board. Been able to work with John and Heidi to review the bond projects, the sinking fund projects, and the budgets. Certainly there's a lot going on with the sinking fund and then the bond, and then certainly, the financial situation of school districts all across the state and certainly here at Lake Orion. Been able to review the academic programming from, conversations with Heidi Mercer and also Carrie, our curriculum director. And I've been able to have online meetings with the staff. We held a few of those. And also we had our opening leadership team meetings where we had some professional development to learn a little bit more about each other, studying the archetypes that each of us have and why we respond in situations the way that we do. It's been very, very helpful. So, the first month has been great. I've had a great opportunity to meet a lot of people. I've been learning a lot. Everybody's been wonderful. Certainly I've had lots of opportunity to hear people's points of view on a variety of things, past, present, and future. And I encourage people to continue to reach out and share with us. That is how we get better. And I'm looking forward to getting better every day. So thank you for that. The next piece I wanted to address was the legislative update. There's been quite a bit going on. The return to learn legislation is really the biggest piece that affects schools. As likely know that was signed off by the governor. It took immediate effect, I believe. But with that, there is now a requirement to have a benchmark assessment that we'll have to do 2 times during the year. And have some reporting out of that. We do have an assessment in place that we feel that will satisfy this requirement. So we're very encouraged by that. So we will be implementing that. Pupil accounting is a big issue. There was a lot of discussion about hold harmless with all this COVID situation, meaning using last year's pupil count. But what has been legislated is that we'll be using 75% from last year's blended count and then 25% for this year's count. There is a formula, and John will be working to calculate all of that and telling us what that means here for Lake Orion. In this legislation, there's an extended continuity of learning plan. That is yet another plan that districts are going to have to create. And it's going to have to be submitted by October. So we'll be getting, that all articulated in writing, and it'll go before the board and again approved by October 1st. The elements of that plan, we have to write in justification or what the necessity is of the plan. We also will be creating educational goals. We'll be addressing the mode of instruction that will be used in the district. This plan will have to be recertified every 30 days. And also we will be, listing out the academic standards or the expectations that we will have of our learners. And we also have to explain how there's going to be equitable access for those academic standards. We have to articulate the health and safety guidelines, and we also, which we certainly will be, but keeping K-5 as a priority. All of these things that are part of the plan will have to be published on the website, and we have different reporting requirements for all of the items that are within that plan. So we'll be sure to follow through with all of that. So there's some additional requirements as we move forward as a school district. Also within it, there is student attendance clarification. So they really explained or articulated how we are to take attendance for pupil accounting purposes. So they have laid that out. So that has been helpful. And then also the days and hours, as everybody probably knows, 1,098 hours and 180-day requirement was in place for school districts in our state. For 2021, that requirement has been waived. But we do still have the requirement to provide learning at the equal amount that we would have if we had 180 days. So a little bit nebulous on that, but basically what we need to take away from that is the 1,098, and the 180-day requirement is no longer for 2021. Again, the benchmark assessments that I talked about, one of those we have to give in the first 9 weeks, and the other one we have to give at the end of before the end of the year, basically to show growth. There was some comment about some of the CARES money. I think it's really important for people to understand that when we see that there's CARES money out there, it isn't just that chunk of money that we get. And I know John will probably, or has talked about it already, but we did get some CARES money equal to $350, but we also got a reduction of $175. So there was some give and take, and basically some money moving that has occurred. But the most recent piece that I want to make sure has clarity is that the governor announced $65 million in CARES money, that from the governor's pool, it became what's called GEARS money, but it's money that she has control of, and she announced that she was giving it to school districts, which is admirable and great. And I think it's important to understand that that does not affect Lake Orion Community Schools by $1. We don't get any of that money. And basically the money was distributed based on 50% economically disadvantaged school districts. So if they had have a population of 50% economically disadvantaged, then they were the school districts that got that pool of money. In our county, Oakland County, there were 8 or 9 school districts that were positively impacted by that. The state budget conversation continues. I'm sure John will, talk a little bit more about the consensus revenue conference. It seemed to be more positive than it was in the spring. Certainly, I think it could only go up. That was pretty bleak. But probably one of the most concerning things is that there doesn't really seem to be a plan B. Seems like we're still holding out hope for a federal bailout, which likely is not, coming from all indications, but it seems to be that's what the hope is. The last piece that I wanted to mention prior to the return to school discussion is that Lusk & Albertson, our legal firm, they were acquired this week by Miller Johnson. They're a firm out of Grand Rapids, and they're a very comprehensive law firm, and they're going to be adding the education side of that by having Lusk & Albertson join their team. Kevin Sutton from Lusk & Albertson gave me a call on Monday to share that, and they're really excited about it. For us, we're not going to see anything different. So I think that is great. As far as the bills and things like that, we definitely will see, a different name on the bills, but that is the extent of it. So the service that we get as a district will certainly continue. So I just wanted to make sure that I shared that as well. Okay, I'm going to bring up some slides here for the update on the return to school so that I can share that. So let me get to that here real quick. Okay, can you see the screen okay? Okay. All right, just a few things about the return to school update that I wanted to share, which is really important. And this was a commitment that we made at the last board meeting, that we would give these updates to the Board of Education. And again, I just really can't emphasize that we really would like to get our kids back in school when the time is right. I will talk a little bit about what the time is right looks like. I know that seems to be the question, and there's no great answer for it, quite frankly, but we certainly want to communicate what the things are that we're looking at. And it's also important to understand that the district is a microcosm of our community. So when we're looking at data points, it's really about our community data. There's obviously a lot of data that's out there, but we'll continue to look at the community data. again, I can't emphasize enough that the goal is to get our students back in person. It's the best way for students to learn, but we do understand that it has caused, some major challenges for families, and we're doing what we can to try to help, appease those issues and try to really support families. Again, I think it's important also to remember when we talk about this, we're trying to create an environment where our students have a continuity of learning. It could be easy to say we're going to start in person, but then have to shut down after a week, for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, for a month. And unfortunately, there's some districts that have experienced that have opened up in person. And what we're really trying to do is to provide a continuity of our education program. And that was why we made the commitment and the decision and the recommendation at the last board meeting to start out in the remote so families could plan accordingly. And again, this whole decision is about students, it's about employees, it's about parents, and ultimately our community. And we want to make sure that we are, being responsible to all of those groups. The teacher training that we've had has just been terrific. People have asked, well, what are our teachers going to do different? Well, our teachers have been training and will continue training on flipped classrooms. It's an instructional method model that has, proven to be successful, and our staff has been highly committed to that. And they will continue to learn about that. They'll continue to learn about all the different ways that we can help support students socially and emotionally through the different platforms. And we are not going to forget about that aspect, because that is extremely important during these times. We've had very little money. And again, I know the CARES money, people will point to that. There's CARES money, and the amount that each district gets is different. And we have been able to use some of that CARES money for the one-to-one computer initiative. If you recall, we started out with a commitment through the bond of being able to provide devices for our 9 to 12 students. And then that shifted when we did get some of the COVID or CARES money. We shifted that to all students DK through 12 with devices. And that is definitely going to help as we move forward. And then certainly the Dragon's Den support opportunity, that's something that I'm going to talk a little bit more about in detail. But that was frankly a response to requests that we heard from the community. And we were able to, within about 48 hours, put the concept together, create the opportunity. And I think it's really, really important to understand that that opportunity is only going to be successful if we get employees to actually staff those particular groups and to support them. And again, I'll talk about that a little bit more shortly. But as far as guidance, I talked a little bit about on August 6th, we received some guidance from the Oakland County Health Department that was a great first step for us. That guidance has only gotten better. And I compliment the health department, over the last couple of weeks, it's been really, really good. And I anticipate that maintaining and getting even better. We talked about the testing results taking up 5 to 7 days, 4 to 6 days, depending on, the labs and whatnot. But what the health department is sharing with us is that by the end of this month, they have contracted with a private lab that if people go anywhere in Oakland County, they will be able to get those test results back within 48 hours, which will be significant for us as a school district and for other businesses when you talk about the contact tracing and really making sure that kids are safe. As far as contact tracing, they also have shared with us that they will basically do most of the contact tracing. We certainly will have to help them with who's in groups and those types of things, but they have over 200 staff members that are ready and available to do that. The Oakland County Health Department data dashboard, that's something that, is open to the public. And one of the biggest pieces that has really helped, the zip code data, I talked a little bit about that last time. And through our conversations with the health department, what they've done is they have taken the zip code data and they have now created school district boundaries. And so that is what's really, most important and a great data piece that I'm taking a look at, and all the superintendents are now taking a look at, because we actually have a number and some ideas about what it would be to be a safe opening. And as people look at that zip code data, and as it's broken out by school districts, what you'll notice is that Lake Orion Community Schools is at 17.2 out of the 10,000 cases is how it's measured, or out of 10,000. And as you get on there, you'll notice that 17.2 is the highest in our northern region. And so you can look at all the different school districts, but unfortunately, we're at 17.2, and that is a very concerning number. When we talk about a continuity of our educational program, what that tells us is the likelihood of there being a more of a spread would be higher because we have more positive cases. One of the things that we know about that data, because we've had the conversations weekly, at least with the health department now, and actually have a direct line to the epidemiologist, is that our case issue right now is in our teenagers. And really what's going to end up happening is, for us, we'll be able to watch those results. Does that end up impacting siblings? Do our teenagers quarantine appropriately? And that will really end up telling us down the road when it is that we can get back into in-person instruction. One of the things that I'm working on is I would like to put together a medical personnel advisory committee. And with that, I want to try to get some medical experts, some social emotional experts, some epidemiologists, and from the community, not across the state of Michigan, but from the community. I want to know how our community is reacting to the virus and responding and what they're seeing. One of the things that I've recognized is they don't want to be the one to make the decision about whether or not we go back to school, but they want to be open to telling us, how our community is reacting to the virus. And again, I talked a little bit about having the weekly meetings. Those have continued. I have two different groups that I meet with on a weekly basis. So there's two different times that we're talking about, the opening of schools and the impact of the virus in our area. Ultimately, there are school districts, like I talked about, there are colleges that are starting with in-person, and that is giving us some data as well. And certainly the executive orders that the governor has been putting out gives us guidance as we move forward. As far as supports for the students, again, on September 8th, we'll be starting with remote instruction for everybody. We are looking to have orientation meetings. Those are coming out next week, or those will be taking place next week. Schedules sent from the buildings. But again, really wanted to try to support a successful start for our remote learning. The Dragon's Den, we did create that. Talked a little bit about that being a community response, or a response to the community requests that we have. We recognize the need, and we really, feel for the families, obviously at the elementary level, because we know that this is impacting families. We're trying to do the best that we can to support the learning in the remote environment. Our special education programs, we do have a number that will end up being in person, and that was really important to us as we're moving forward with this goal of trying to get our students back in person. The first 2 weeks, our special education staff, under the leadership of Julie Gutman, will be working on contingency plans for our special education students. After the 2 weeks of the creation of these contingency plans, Pine Tree will basically be at capacity with all their programs running. The categorical programs throughout some of our different buildings will be running. And then also we're looking at those students that have resource room certification, that they would be getting support as well. And I think it's really important to understand why we can do this. These groups are 4 to 10 students at a time. And when we talk about having safe, a safe environment, That allows us to social distance appropriately. Masks will be required, and certainly they will be in cohorts or pods, whatever term that you want to use. But that is going to allow us to get some of our smaller groups in, and that's why we're able to do that with these groups. I can't thank the special education team, again, under the leadership of Julie Gutman, enough for their creativity and really figuring out how our students can get back into the classroom. Our preschool programs, those will continue to run. And again, I think it's important to understand they're at a ratio of 1:8. And so that meets guidelines that allows us to social distance appropriately. And certainly Chris talked tonight about the extracurricular activities. We have a number of students that are participating in those. And we think that that is something that is definitely important for the social, emotional, and the needs of our students. So a little bit about Dragon's Den. I think it's really, I can't emphasize enough that we recognize when we made the decision, and it was a difficult recommendation to make because our goal, again, is to get our students back to in-person instruction, is we understand that this is creating a hardship. And we listened to the community. We wanted to try to come up with a way to support the remote side of the learning. Our teachers are still teaching, whether the students are at their home or they're at a library or wherever it is they're receiving. That is going to be dependent on people's situation. And we're trying to create an environment so that we can support with different staff, not teachers, the remote learning that students would experience. Along with this decision to start in remote, what that meant is that we have food service employees, we have staff associates, we have bus drivers that don't have any work. And so with that, there's been a number of our staff that we haven't been able to continue to employ because there isn't going to be work for them. So we're hoping that through those groups that we can have enough staffing for this program. If you're in the community and you're interested in supporting students in this manner, in a small group size, social distanced, get a hold of Rick Arnett in our Human Resources Department. We'd love to have you in the mix to help support our students. But I can't emphasize enough, these are not teachers and students coming in with teachers. These will be other staff members that will be supporting the learning from the student side as our teachers are continuing to deliver the instruction remotely. Again, these are all going to be staff dependent. I can't emphasize that enough. We have to have enough staff in order to have the students that we want to have. We're looking at hours of 8 to 3, 3:10. Again, our students will have masks, they'll be social distance, and they'll be in cohorts. Those are the ideal pieces for having safe and successful environments. These will be in open locations throughout our district. We'll be using larger spaces. And again, they will be in cohorts no more than 10 students. And again, that's why we feel that it is a safe environment. It's been well received. We've had a lot of people that have registered already. And Lori McGraw and the enrichment services, they were able to create this opportunity, basically with about 48 hours, and we got it out to the community. So I thank them deeply for that, and hopefully it helps support our students in the way that it's intended. As far as future considerations, as much as people want there to be one number or one reason that's going to get us back to in person, there just really isn't one. And you can read a lot of different articles, but that's what you're going to find, is that there's not one metric that people can look at. But these are the different things that myself and other superintendents across our state are looking at. Obviously, the phases in Michigan is kind of the big, broad picture, where we're at as a state. We have those cohort groups, that I've talked about, Chris has talked about. We'll be taking a look at the success of those groups. Other districts around us, there are a couple of districts that are in person. Out of the 28 districts in Oakland County, there are 2 that are going in person. One of those 2 districts has has the ability to do the 6-foot social distancing because their capacity is so low in their facilities, and that allows them to have a safe environment, and it makes a lot of sense for them to experience. We'll be watching, schools in Oakland County, Livingston County, other counties across the state to see if they're able to continue their education programs. And if they're having to have multiple interruptions, that is going to be giving us, some data pieces as well. Again, the health department, we're meeting with them at least weekly. We actually, as Northern superintendents, have an opportunity where we're going to be meeting with them twice. So we feel, grateful for that. And again, with the testing results, I spoke to 48 hours. Once we get that 48-hour response time on the test, that will be very, very helpful for us as far as the exposures and the contact tracing and so on. And that will help us get back towards an in-person environment. I talked a little bit about the school district boundaries and the trends that are there. It'll be very important as we watch that. That is going to be a data point that we watch that gets updated on Thursdays. And again, we're at 17.2 right now, which is not a number that is going to get us back to school, unfortunately. We'll be looking at 30-day and 14-day trends. When we look at the positive tests on a 30-day trend, it will give us a lot of information. If in the 14-day trend, our data continues to spike, that tells us that those cases that are in the 30-day didn't quarantine well, or they weren't able to social distance, however you want to term it, but that the virus was spread, because of that. So that's another piece of data that we'll be watching, and the health department will help us with that. We know right now that with our school district boundaries, they've given us some specifics that, again, it's our teenage group that has been, testing positive at a higher rate. And so we'll keep that in mind. Talked a little bit about hospital capacity, not an issue. Vaccine progress, that's something that'll be important in this whole fight against this virus. And then the feedback, the positives and the areas of growth that we get from, staff and from community that'll tell us something. There's also the Harvard Global Health Matrix. That is yet another data piece that has come to light recently. Right now we are in a yellow, which is a community spread, which means that we need rigorous test and trace programs in order to move forward. Now that particular study, their goal is to get to 0 cases. We don't have to get to 0 cases to bring our students back, but we certainly need to be trending in the right way in order for us to feel comfortable about that. The plan is, at this point, for planning purposes for families, is that November 9th, we're looking to be back in person. And again, all of the pieces that I just talked about will inform us. We'll continue to assess this data and all these pieces, see how people are doing. I really feel like we need to have a positive trend over to a 2-week period. That is information that we've received from the health department. And I think that it's really going to take us, in order to pivot successfully, I think it's going to take us probably up to 2 weeks to make that transition if we are to identify that we can get back sooner. I do want to emphasize that we recognize that we have elementary buildings, we have middle school buildings, and we have high school buildings. If the trend continues that our high school age students, for example, continue to trend upward, but our elementary age students or middle school age students are not in that, that same trend line, then we certainly could consider, bringing back different levels at different times. And that's something that is definitely on our radar, and we'll continue to communicate as this becomes, continues to evolve. So those are the things that I wanted to share with you this evening, and I certainly would be open to any questions that you might have about our return to school.
Thank you, Ben. You covered a lot of ground there in a short time. Questions for Ben? Yes, Scott.
Thanks, Ben. I know that you've been dealing with a lot of questions from the board all week. And I really appreciate your timeliness and getting back with all of us, because I know we're all having discussions with you. The one thing that I keep coming up with as far as people asking me in the community is going back to the special ed piece. And I'm just wondering if you can expound a little bit as far as what the plan is, as far as when parents will know if their children are involved in the in-person piece, or if you can just go a little bit deeper on that, or if it's still we're not sure, that's fine. But I think that's very important because I think that's very reassuring to people with special ed students.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
that's a very important section.
Yeah, absolutely. And Heidi, feel free to chime in too if I miss some points or there's some other pieces to add. But yeah, I guess I would like to recognize, the Board of Ed. You guys have been great about giving me things to think about, giving our team things to think about, ideas. I know this has been difficult on all of us. As far as your special education question, Julie and her team has been reaching out to families already. I believe they reached out last week, Friday, I believe it was, to let them know that they will be communicated with shortly. And then there was some more information that went out, I believe this week. So I believe the families that are going to be impacted with the in-person have been communicated with. Again, I talked a little bit about the first 2 weeks, starting September 8th. That first 2 weeks, they will be creating contingency plans with the families. And that's really what the communication has been about, is we will be meeting with you to create a plan for your students. And those plans are, everywhere from like a hybrid type model to, half day models. There's a lot of creativity that they're looking at. But Heidi, is there anything more that you could add about the special education programming?
Yeah, I would say that these plans are being worked out with the IEP team. And so as Ben had stated, each one will look a little bit different. Students have to qualify, for the in-person. And then there are other plans that can be, and will be created as well, all based on student need. And that is how it's typically done by law in special education, is an IEP team has to come together, analyze and review the student progress that took place in the spring, and analyze all of that data to see how the student is progressing, and then make a decision as to what the student needs for this fall. So all of that, as Ben said, Julie has started communicating, and the teachers with their families, and then the first couple weeks of school, all of those IEPs will take place so that each child has their own plan that will individually meet their needs.
And one more question. Thank
Yes.
you. Do we see that all happening at Pine Tree Center or at all different buildings?
No, it will happen at all. It will happen at different buildings. So for instance, like we have categorical programming at Paint Creek. And so students who attend, those programs at Paint Creek, it would happen at their home building.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
You're welcome. And one other thing that I wanted to recognize too is that the district did get 2 nurses through the Oakland County Health Department collaboration, where we've met with them. So we're making some progress with them. They know that in the Cirque building and Pine Tree Center is where our highest population is going to be. So, they're aware of that, and they have a role that they're going to help us with as a district, but I wanted to make sure to share that as well.
Other questions for Ben? Yes, Mary Jo.
Ben, this has to do with Dragon's Den. I know you made all of these points in the slides, but I just want to reiterate them because there's been a lot of misinformation flying around the internet. So I just want to drive some things home. Will teachers be in these spaces for Dragon's Den?
They will not. They will be at the other end of the computer, basically.
Correct. So they'll be teaching the students who are actually virtual, whether they're in a Dragon's Den situation, but they're not going to be watching the students in those spaces, correct?
They will not. This will be completely different staff. It's just basically creating a supervision model.
Got it. Second question is, the locations you picked, you said there can only be 10 students, so it's not a full classroom size, so it's not like a classroom. For those folks who may not have seen the list, what kind of spaces are you utilizing for that in each building? A classroom, larger spaces?
There are larger open spaces. I think we've talked a little bit about some cafeteria spaces, some media center spaces. There might be like some atrium type spaces, but larger spaces. Again, the big piece is wearing the mask, the 6-foot social distancing, and keeping kids cohorted. We're able to accomplish that when we have groups the size of 4 to 10, and that's what we're looking at. And that's why we're comfortable in, going down this road to provide the support in this manner.
Got it. And lastly, how was the cost decided? What did you guys look at for that?
So the cost was something where we're really trying to be, we're trying to be neutral on this program. We know how many staff we need to accomplish what we're hoping to serve as far as students. And then basically there was some math that was done to try to figure out what the minimum would be that we would have to have in order to hire these people back. Because we don't have people on staff right now waiting for work. The people we have are already assigned to be on the other side. They're teaching, they're on the teaching side of it. They're the parapros that are going to be assisting with the special education program. They're the social workers and all the other people that will be supporting the social emotional. They all have assignments. That's not what these people are. These will be people either new to the district or people that have been laid off because we don't have work for them, because this is new work.
Right, right. And I would just like to say too that I actually know somebody who does daycare in her home, and I just popped her a message and said, hey, question for you, what do you charge per day? And it's right in line with what she charges per day for an elementary age student that would be there all day. So kudos to you guys for, keeping it within what the local dynamic is in terms of pricing.
Right, I appreciate that. And Lori in our enrichment services, she's just been a great help in all of this, and her running the camps, that also gave us, an idea of cost and what was fair and how we can, do this. So, without her help, we would not be able to provide this. So there's a lot of districts that aren't, trying this opportunity. We could have sat back and said we weren't going to do anything, or we could try to come up with a solution. So we created a solution. It's not a solution for everybody, unfortunately. And so hopefully if it's an opportunity that impacts some families, we'll feel good about that. We'll continue to try to figure out how to, support everybody. That's our goal. That's our mission. But we know that this isn't the solution for everybody.
Thanks.
Mary Jo, I think another thing that might help clarify some of the misinformation that's out there as well is, and John, feel free to chime in at any time, K-12 dollars that are designated to educate students are very specific in how they can be spent.
Yep.
And providing daycare does not qualify under a K-12 scenario. So it would be very risky for us, and John, feel free to chime in, for us to try to utilize K-12 designated dollars for this program. It really needs to be a self-sufficient program, like our camps and our other enrichment type of activities.
Yeah.
So those that are, questioning why are we spending money on that, why don't we provide this for free? That's not something we're able to do from a financial standpoint. John, anything else in that regard?
No, you covered it good.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? Yes, Bergen.
Hi, thank you. Rick, thank you for saying that. And I just want to say it one more time, a little bit louder for those in the back. You're not charging for school at Dragon's Den, right? Or Ben, whoever wants to say that. We're not charging for school with Dragon's Den. You're charging for childcare, right?
We're charging for this.
Completely different. So the people who keep saying, now you're charging us to send our kids to school. No, we're not.
We're charging for the supervision, correct? Not
Thank
the
you.
instruction. You're welcome. And I get it, and I understand why people feel that way. And I think it's really important that people reach out and ask us those questions. We're able to answer those. Mark does a wonderful job of putting together a Q&A. It's on the website. If we can direct people back to that, there's a lot of information there as well, but point necessary.
And if people are out there and they have questions, they can email our communications email address. We respond to everyone. We explain the circumstances, and we're glad to do that. So please reach out instead. If you don't want to do it on social media, you can reach out to us directly, and we're glad to respond directly to you in email. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that, Mark. I appreciate
Thanks, Mark.
that about you. So I have a few more questions. Ben, I wanted to get back to you about the new dashboard edition on the Oakland County COVID dashboard that talks about the school districts. And I think that's kind of cool. And for people that are on it, you got to actually go to the bottom and look at the tabs to pull up different information. And what I wanted to ask you about that, Ben, since you've been on it a little more frequently than I have been, I'm sure, there are 17.2 cases that you state. Are those known positives, or are they doing what they had been doing, known positives plus probable positives? Because that changes the dynamic of that percentage.
Yeah, the total positives, and to be honest with you, how they come up with 17.2 out of 10,000, I mean, I really can't. The 10,000 number, first off, is they're using that. I think that's a census number. The last time the census was done, I think that's where that number comes from. But the current cases, like there's 71 positive cases. That's a different number, but there's 71 positive cases within our school district boundaries. So 17.2 is their ratio that they're using, and that helps the rest of the school districts, around, or that gives us some idea and a number. Now, the epidemiologist was helpful in giving us some guidelines about what the 17.2 means. I'm not comfortable saying that this is the number that we're striving towards, a certain number, because we could get to that number, but we could have a really bad trend too over 30 days. So we need to make sure to keep that in mind. The part of what is really helpful is I can call up the epidemiologist. Our number's at 17.2. Like maybe tomorrow when they update it, let's say tomorrow it's at 24. I could call her and say, okay, I see we jumped to 24. That's a jump of 7. What is that? Why is that? And she'll be able to tell me, you have some senior housing, and we had a spike in your senior housing. So that tells me as a decision maker in the school district, I don't need to be so worried about that spike on that particular case, because now I know that data. I didn't know that data 3 weeks ago.
Right.
And so now we have that data. She's able to tell me it's your high school age students. Then that was the last data point that we have. And I think that's just been really, really helpful for us.
So thank you. That's exactly where I was going with all this. So the 17.2 is actually their number when they're looking at it per 10,000 cases. I've heard the governor throw out things sometimes per million, but for practical purposes, and I've seen it pretty common in other counties, Oakland County is using a per 10,000 as a measure. And the 71 cases, as you just clarified, is not necessarily students. We're looking at who's positive within the boundary of our schools. And that you are able to get the information to dive deeper and look at what it is for students. And I'm guessing it's mostly high school that we're looking at, that is even more telling. So the one thing I want to ask you about, and this affects Lake Orion, and as much as we have a cap of 10% and other districts have a much higher percent, but how does schools of choice impact that, knowing we draw kids from other school boundaries into our school district?
So again, the data, so they would not be in that, first off. They would not be in that. But the other piece that I've done, that I've been doing since I started this, if you go to the other tab, which is recent cases by zip code, there are, I've created an Excel spreadsheet, and I have been tracking 6 zip codes, which are our immediate boundaries, and then those around us, and looking at what those trends are. Are they going up? Are they going down? Obviously those are larger numbers, right? I mean, we might have a small section of independents, but that number reflects all of independents, for example, but I'm watching those too. And those numbers, 4 of those 6 zip codes have spiked over the last week. And so again, that's another data point that tells us that we aren't ready yet to have a continuous education program in person.
Right. Yeah, I hear you, and I am glad to hear that you are so on the metrics of this so far, as that will help as we move forward. I wanted to touch also on the RNs that you mentioned that we are getting, and they are in. There was a time, I think last week, with the Oakland County School Board Association where we were told they were going to be remote, and the board was shuffled a little bit, and now they are coming into the buildings or coming to the district. So I listened to Chris Beld in his presentation talk about, things happen, and he's phoning the Oakland Health Department. And I'm wondering if having the nurses here and live for us, if that will help situations like that, to help you and Chris Bell and certain people to have the resource of them here to help answer some of these questions or scenarios that you run into.
Yeah, so a learning point for us, we had the opportunity to meet with our nurse, one of our two nurses, and the supervisor of the nurses as a cabinet. We met with them. It actually was over the phone. So they are not going to assist in the manner in which you're talking. So we aren't going to be turning over, when Chris gets a positive case, we get a positive case. We aren't turning it over to the nurse and saying, this is a positive case. They aren't even, they basically have told us to not put them in our communication cycle, because we asked about that. We created it for our administrators, for our staff. What do you do when you find out there's a positive case? We considered putting the nurses in. So I point blank asked the question, where are they at in that cycle? They are not there. Their role is about education, how to wash hands, how to wear masks, social distancing. They're going to physically come into our buildings to look at our layouts and what types of safeguards we have in place as far as the sneeze guards and the hallway signage and all of that. And they're going to give us some ideas. And the amount of time that they are in person and the amount of time that they are remote is to be determined as this all unravels. They do know the two buildings, Cirque and Pine Tree, that will be the most dense with our population. That is a big interest for us to have them available to those students to help, teach them the appropriate cleaning measures and all of that.
So I heard you say in-person and remote. So they're not full-time here for us. Some of their work will be done remotely.
I think it's to be determined. I know what you're saying. I know, when we had conversation, they were open to being in person. I think that it's important, and we're really happy that one of the nurses is one of our parents. And so that parent, obviously, she's going to have children as well. They're not our employee. So I think we can't force them to do things. What we have as far as expectations, we will certainly, give that guidance, and we want to work with that nurse to help benefit our students and our district. But we aren't really in charge of them, so to speak.
Yeah, for anybody that doesn't know or that's watching and doesn't know, these are, they're actually employees of the health department, but it's grant funded to the districts being paid for in combination between the ISD and the county. And so that's how we're landing this. And we had a meeting last night, Oakland County School Board Association meeting, where we talked about this, and a question was asked about the length of time, acknowledging that we get about 90 days with them. And if there were needs to extend that time frame, I think that is being looked into as well. So there's a lot of unknowns as we move forward. One thing I also wanted to ask, you mentioned preschool is going on, and I'm assuming Head Start's also going to be meeting. That's just in my mind. It says that grant is coming later and that they're starting later. Is that accurate, Heidi? Are they coming in October? Are the Head Start kids starting? No.
No, they're starting on time.
They're starting on time. Okay, so is that part of what your numbers are for preschool?
Yes. Yeah.
So
yep, they'll be starting as planned. To my knowledge, I've not been told that it's been pushed back. Everything has been a go.
So we'll have Head Start, and then when you say preschool, is that in addition to, is community preschool still a go?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay.
And again, Birgit, I just want to emphasize, those are 1-to-8 ratios.
Right.
So that's why it's something that we're able to do.
So would you be able to, in the future, keep us updated on the special ed and how that's going and what numbers turn out to be? Because is that going to be in every elementary building then, or also middle schools? Will wraparound services occur? Do you have to be in a full day special ed to get speech therapy or occupational therapy? Can you expand just a little bit more for me on that?
I think Heidi mentioned, and I talked a little bit about the contingency plan creations
Yeah.
and whatnot, but as the plans evolve, we will be more than happy to share out with you the schedules as they're created. I as you guys know, as I get information, I've been trying to give you timely information as things evolve. I have committed to you to be giving you updates at the board meetings. I'll continue to do that as well. And that certainly will include the special education programming.
Sounds good.
All right, thank you. Others, other questions for Ben? Yes.
I had just one. It came up last time when we were talking through, and Ben, you were sharing the return to school plan, the significance of November 9th, and it's come up a couple of times for me since. And usually it comes up almost as a political accusation that says, is that date timed with the November election on it? It's been very easy to pop open the high school calendar and you see the star on November 6th, which is the semester end, and dispel that as very much not a politically motivated time frame. It's practically and operationally driven, that would make the 9th the first day after the semester break on it. One thing that I couldn't pull, or I couldn't find in my notes that I was curious about, I couldn't remember how far back the calendar is set every year. And I remember it being incredibly far in advance when we're setting those dates. And I was wondering, I figured probably Birgit or Jake would know right off the top of their head how many months in advance the annual calendar is set. But I was wondering if anybody did know off the top of their head, just to put that to rest, that date is in any way politically motivated.
Rick.
Yeah,
please.
Yeah, the contract, as you know, is negotiated with our LOEA. We try to the best of our ability to have that done February, March at the latest of the prior year. So yes, that was addressed pre-COVID. And just to clarify, Nate, it is the end of the marking period, not the semester.
End of the marking.
Yes.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, good clarification. Yep.
Yeah, and that's typically when you have a marking period grade, then you start back at 0 again for the next marking period.
Yeah.
And average the two together kind of thing. So that was a nice academic break. And that was the main reason for that decision.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would
go ahead.
Go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to say, the other piece to remember, we want to get our kids back in person when the community is ready for it, based on, the COVID positives and all the things I talked about, right? There might become a time in October that we get our elementary kids back early. That could happen. There would be I shouldn't say nobody happier, because I think there's a lot of elementary parents who would be happier, right? But we would be very happy if we're able to get that back, get students back in before November 9th. So it really has nothing to do with anything other than the marking period, as Rick stated. And it just made sense. And we wanted, I guess the other piece is, I don't want to belabor the point, is it allowed us to give families the ability to plan. Because again, a lot of this is driven on about a continuity of education program. So we could go week to week, but that doesn't help families. And so we felt like by giving them a definitive date, and this is what we're looking at, again, that was a logical place to stop. So thanks for surfacing that, because it is important.
Yes, Mary Jo. I
would just like to add a point to that, because if you remember when we had this discussion last meeting about when we would have to make the decision, we would be making the decision well before the election. We are making the decision in mid-October, so it really has nothing to do with the election.
Okay, other questions? Thank you, Mary Jo. Other questions? Yes, Jake.
So one of the comments, we all seem to be addressing things that we've been contacted or we've seen publicly. And one of the things that came up too was, well, the board and the administration are in cahoots. These things are decided before the meetings. And some of that is true, that the decision is made during the meeting, but we are privy to some of the things that the administration is going to prepare. And when they ask, well, not many people were asking questions. Even tonight, it's been said, we all feed questions back in, because these meetings work better as school district governance if Ben and Heidi and Rick, et cetera, can work into their presentations the questions that we have. Because if one of us has the question, probably many of us have the question, and many of the community have the question. So to get all of the information into the presentations is the best. So a lot of our questions that we asked during the meeting are in direct response to what we've heard in the meetings. So a couple of the questions that I have been, and they sort of jump around because you had a lot of updates. One of them is any board action needed to approve the change of law firms? Because I know sometimes we go through and we have to list out the attorneys of record for the district. So either to John or to you, is that something that we need to vote on as a board because it's a different legal entity?
It just happened and it was just announced. It's something that I'm looking into as to whether or not we need to do that as far as the name of the firm. So we'll get some updates on that.
Okay. Jumping around, like I said, nurses, someone brought up an interesting point of what they'll do. They're not here to help us trace, but they're here to help us, and you mentioned wash hands and things like that. So would there be any ability to incorporate the nurses into some of the remote learning lessons? And I guess that question could go to Heidi to say, because that would be a neat idea to teach at age appropriate levels, because I know I've learned things like why wait for the water to get warm, because it breaks down the oils that encase the virus. We've all learned a lot and age appropriate. So will we be able to do that for the students?
Yes, in fact, that is one of the things that cabinet did request sooner rather than later. So yes.
So that'll be
the nurse did agree that, it's another way too of ensuring that, these nurses will be right, in and about the buildings, which hopefully we'll soon have our students back. And so that's another way of, students seeing their face and kind of getting to know them before they're in the building.
Jake, are you willing to share what song you sing to yourself while washing your hands to know?
I haven't advanced that far, Nate. I'm a work in progress.
All right. All right. Thanks.
And then the other thing that I say is you talked about the continuity, and one of the aspects that I don't know that we touched on enough was making a firm decision at the last board meeting when we were still 4 weeks out from the start of school, allowed a focus of the preparation that we admitted what happened in the spring, and it can't be said enough. That was an emergency response. So the education that will be delivered starting September 8th is very much planned, and all of the professional development that's going on. So I appreciate the fact that and to recognize that staff contracts and things like that. One of the things I hate the most is that teachers only work 9 months of the year. Teachers work a lot in the summer to prepare for their next year, and this year we put a lot on the staff. And I remember you saying that the participation rate at the last meeting, Heidi, was just in the 90%. So just to put, can you touch on some of those aspects so that the community can hear that this will be different? Because I don't think we can emphasize that enough.
Yeah, the professional development and the work that teachers and instructional coaches have been doing over the summer has been remarkable. All of our teachers will have completed a minimum of 9 hours of professional development just regarding instruction. That's at a minimum, in addition to all of the other things that we have offered and they have taken advantage of. Again, a lot of that has happened virtually, but we have also been offering small groups this week for professional development as well. And all of those sessions that we have offered have been full. So again, teachers have, and more than just teachers, I mean, all staff have been working throughout the summer to ensure that we are ready for September 8th. And we're excited about that. In addition to making sure that, our orientation goes well next week. That is something, we typically don't have a student orientation. However, with remote learning, we recognize that we have students that, need to meet their teacher in person. That's critical, especially at the elementary level. And, picking up their device and picking up their materials and just trying to make, that short but personal connection, saying that, we're excited about September 8th. And this year is going to look a little bit different, but it's going to be a great year.
Thank you for those updates.
Okay. Any other questions before we close this out with Ben? I did have one question, Ben, regarding the 2-week period you referred to, review period. And if you could just speak to, I'm sure people will ask the question in their own mind, when's that 2-week period run? Are we talking about when school begins? Are we talking about ongoing period of 2 weeks right now, assessing all the factors? Can you just elaborate on that just a bit?
Yeah, I want to make sure I'm answering your question. So if I don't, please
Sure.
ask a follow-up. But so it's ongoing. So it has been going the whole time. And what we really need to see is about a 2-week positive trend. And then once we recognize that positive trend as far as positive test, the 14-day positive rate compared to the 30-day positive rate, you're able to tell how the community is reacting. Once we see those positive trends, and the health department will help us with that. I couldn't have said that 3 weeks ago, but I can say that now, that I feel comfortable that they will help us with that. As far as our trend, once we see that, that will become a point in time that we can confidently say, let's look at this group, let's look at everybody. And then from that point, I feel like with staff and families that it will probably take up to 2 weeks to make that pivot to get back to the in-person learning.
Okay, so really it's not a set 2-week period. I'm just trying to clarify because people will have questions. It's really a rolling 2-week look back.
Yes.
That will be assessed ongoing.
Yes.
But it's a 2-week look back.
Yes. Yes. Like I said, I've been keeping track of on a spreadsheet since I got here 5 weeks ago, how things have been going up, down, and whatnot. And then
so you're assessing daily, really?
Correct.
Great. All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you.
Move on to the policy committee report. And we have a first reading on policies this evening. Who's going to take that?
Yeah,
Jake?
so I'll take that update. So we did meet on Monday? No, last week. Monday? I can't remember. It was I'm sorry about that. But what we talked about for 2.5 hours was a federally mandated Title IX update. So what you see in your packet is revoking an existing policy on, I think it was sexual assault, sexual harassment and assault. That's going to get pulled. and then a new Title IX policy. So the highlights of the Title IX policy are, there were some board decisions, but we're going to have Title IX coordinators have to be named. Neola, who is our third-party policy advisor who we outsource, they fed us everything that needed to be in the federal law and in some recommendations. So we're appointing Rick as a Title IX coordinator and Heidi as a Title IX coordinator, so that any individual in the district can bring it, and teachers and certain staff are mandatory reporters under the law. We as a board chose to have students, other adults connected to the building. So the way the guy described it, the vendor who fills up the Coke machine, and including the Board of Education members, we are strongly encouraged to be reporters. So all of that information that you see in there is something that we do have to act on quickly, because the federal government has said that if you do not implement the new Title IX regulations, then federal funding to your school district essentially won't be available. So we talked about it, and of course the federal government rolled it out and didn't really give enough time. So we even discussed, do we need to do a special meeting to implement it? And Wayne Peters, our advisor, and Ben were able to say, no, it's fine to do a first reading of it tonight, and then a second reading adoption, which isn't aligned with how we typically adopt policies. So if anybody has any questions about the content of what was the recommendations that are the policy as it's laid out that's in your packet, we'd be glad to.
All right, any questions on the policies? Yes, Birgit.
Yeah, I don't have a question for you, Jake. I'm just going to clarify that the policy that's being rescinded starts on page 32, and it's noted because it's all in red and everything is struck out on it. And I will say it's very rare that we rescind a policy, but this Title IX has been cooking and recooking for all years. And the remake of this, Wayne shared with us that this is a 2003-page federal policy. So that it's been whittled down to 20 pages, which is usually a very long policy for us. But for what they did, that's probably about as short as they could make it. And so that's in your packet for first reading tonight.
Okay, any other questions regarding these policies? It sounds like it's pretty straight away. We are compelled to adopt these.
Yeah, there are some options, but administration cabinet had a meeting, and as they always do, they go through and look which of the options work best. They presented those to policy committee, and we concurred that those types of things they were looking at made sense for Lake Orion Community Schools.
Great. All right. Hearing no questions, thank you very much. That'll serve as our first reading. We'll have our second reading on our next meeting. There is no board self-assessment committee report this evening.
No.
Oakland County School Board Association, and these are the 2020 bylaw amendments. It's the second reading. Birgit?
Yep, yes, it's in your packets for the second time around. We had our first reading at our last meeting. Tonight is our second reading, and I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have. It's pretty straightforward. The committee did a nice job with their changes and providing a table with those changes and the reasoning and logic behind them. So we're going to appreciate your thoughtfulness and your vote tonight.
All right, thank you. The MASB Fall Conference delegates and Birgit?
I'm happy to field that too. MASB, if you recall, part of my explanation about the OCSBA issues that created the need for the changes were as such that were things that we were experiencing in the bylaws that because of the pandemic were unique, things that we found we couldn't do, and MASB is experiencing the same thing. So this year at the annual leadership conference, which will all be virtual, we typically have a delegate evening, and in there we vote on work that the Resolutions and Bylaws Committee does, and I am on that this year. And we've worked hard, and we do have things to present, but because the vote has to be in person, we will not be able to present our work. So it changes the whole dynamic of the delegate assembly, and we are assured that while we won't be reading resolutions and bylaws and updating that, it's sure to be a lively evening. In fact, I think I wrote it down. Jill Fennessy, the current president of MASB, past President Matthew Showalter, and MASB Executive Director Don Rotuba will have a presentation with Q&A. And again, this will all be virtual. So that may be far more interesting than going through resolutions and bylaws for most people. I'm not sure. So just,
I think I would agree with you.
there's no need for us to appoint delegates this year for the MASB Annual Leadership Conference, but the deadline to register is by October 30th. So let Julie know as soon as you think you are interested and available to attend.
Great. Thanks, Birgit. Appreciate
Jim,
it. Yes.
Before we move on, I want to also give an update from the OCSBA. Just didn't even know where to
Please do. This is a good place to do it.
We had, as you all know, because you've been getting my emails as I'm the secretary, to invite you to the conversations that we've had board member to board member. And this week, in fact, last night, we held a conversation of which there were 8 county commissioners in attendance and also a deputy executive, county executive, who also happens to be on the Huron Valley Board of Education. We had put that together because there had been some advocacy along on the county level for working with the Oakland Health Department and some of the insufficiencies districts were experiencing in working with them and what their toolkit provided or didn't provide. And it landed, we landed on with some of the commissioners of having a combined conversation with board members from across the county and some of them that were interested in attending. And that occurred last night. I will say we didn't solve too much, but we had their ears for a while. And what did happen today was a direct outcome today. There was a press release by the Oakland County Health Department. Among our questions last night were about testing. And I thought it was interesting because Chris Bell referred to recommending kids getting tested and doing through Oakland County Health Department. And yet in their toolkit, it said youth testing locations would be determined. And here we are amidst school ready to start. For some, it's already started. And it hadn't been determined yet. In fact, of the Oakland County Health Department's test sites, there were restrictions on who could go get a test and that you had to be 18 or older. So we were asking, what are you going to do for the kids? The school's opening and people are making recommendations. Now, a lot of our families will go to their doctor, but there's families that won't have that ability for whatever reason. And so we were saying, you need to do something. So today a press release was made by the Oakland County Health Department, and starting tomorrow, free testing for children ages 4 to 17 will be made available at the Oakland County Health Department test site. The children must have symptoms to be tested, and parents, it's preferred that they make an appointment. So I'm excited that sometimes we get results when we advocate and we grab the ear of someone. So as we continue to move along, I hope that there will be more changes that are positive and productive for school districts across the county. And I hope that you guys will consider participating in that should the opportunity arise and you have the time available. And that's it.
All right. Thank you. The Oakland County School Board Association has certainly become much more engaged, and that's always a good thing when we're advocating for students and families. So thank you.
Yeah, so we'd also say to Cabinet that if you have ideas that you want to give to Birgit to meet to any of us board members that might be going to that meeting, send it to us. And because like we said, that sometimes last night we hammered home that what are kids going to do, and the county commissioners all, you could tell they're like, oh my gosh, this is wrong. Like, I can't believe they don't know that, they're like us, that it's not their full-time job to be county commissioners. So if we can bring some things to their attention, so we'll put that out to you, Ben, and coordinate that, but feel free to send that back to us.
Great. Thank you, Jake. All right. Any other questions about the Oakland County School Board Association? All right. Thank you. We'll move on to student achievement and Assistant Superintendent update. Heidi?
All right, I do have a couple things. Ben, in his report, highlighted several things as well. So we are very excited about our one-to-one initiative, and we'll be kicking that off next week during our student orientation. So we're really excited about that. As well, we are really anticipating and excited to have our teachers back on Monday. And so we are looking forward to that. Soon, parents will be getting information regarding our parent university. We will be having a parent university. These will be virtual, but there will be a parent university for Seesaw, which is our elementary platform, as well as our Microsoft Teams, which is our secondary platform. So you'll be receiving dates and times for those. Those will be coming out prior to school starting. And if we do have, obviously, parents who cannot attend at a particular time, those will be recorded so that you can watch them and refer back to them as needed. So just know that we are putting our parent university together. We are going to do things a little bit differently this year. We anticipate that we will run parent university virtual for a good portion of the year. This way, we're also going to see if this may work better, because we'll be able to record the session and then be able to post it for families, for parents to watch at any point in time. So it may be a better option. So we are going to try that and see what parents think for this year. So in addition to that, as I said, typically we do come out with a parent university calendar ahead of time. We will not be doing that this year. Parent university notifications will be coming out monthly, because we will be picking topics for the current time and what we feel our parents really need, and getting feedback from them. So we are still going to have it, just will look a little bit different this year. And I believe in regards to everything else, I think it was covered earlier.
Great. Thank you. So we'll move on to bond design team's report, and please.
Okay. Our right now we have Stadium and Paint Creek. They've not met in the past couple weeks because we are at a point where we're having a little break. And then when those two teams come back together, they'll be working on finer details of, office, furniture, things like that. So we've been off for a few weeks with the design teams. However, today, as you know, was an exciting day. All of Cabinet and the board got to tour our construction sites, and we got to see the amazing progress that is taking place at Weber, Carpenter, Orion Oaks, and of course our Early Childhood Center. So I know that Mark put together a flyer on that, which I'm sure he's probably already posted on the website, as well as he has taken many pictures of our progress. So I urge our community to take a look at the website under the bond and see all the new and exciting things that are happening.
Thank you. And I should point out that it was really underscored for the board, all the work that was put into preparation for these next steps at the buildings we toured today. And the amount of work that was done by the teams that were focused on particular buildings. But beyond that, what was even more apparent was the amount of work that Heidi put into this and her leadership of those teams to develop what the end product is beginning to shape up as. And I think the community is going to be delighted with what they're going to see when they return to school. And I just once again want to extend some thanks to Heidi for her leadership on that.
Thank you. It truly was a team effort. These design teams did a wonderful job, and I can't wait for the community to see. It's great progress. So thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to curriculum committee report. Is there a report tonight?
No, but we will be meeting on September the 2nd.
Great, thank you. Lamp of Learning committee report. I don't believe we have one tonight.
No report.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on to to human resources and Rick.
Yes, thank you. Before you tonight, I have a recommendation for hire for 3 special education teachers. First being Sarah O'Kiernan. Sarah comes to us by way of relocating from the Chicago area. So she comes to us with a little bit of experience. She would be at Orion Oaks in the ASD program. Next would be Julie Moore, also relocating to the area. And she would be at Paint Creek in our CI program. And then lastly is Terry Fassel. And I'm going to speak a little bit about her because I think it's important for you to hear this. She actually was a student in Lake Orion a few years back and went through our teacher cadet program. And that is, as you know, a program we've had for many years. And over the course of my time here, we've managed to hire a few people back hire them here after having experienced our teacher cadet program at the high school. But in addition to that, there's a little story I think is important I'd like to share if I could real quick. During her time in college, she actually wrote an essay, and I'm not exactly sure the content or what was around it, but the focus of that essay was one of our high school teachers, Josh Hoschler. And that essay actually won Josh an award from the Kennedy Center. And it had a significant dollar amount associated with it. And when she wrote this piece, he had said to her, you know, if I win, I'm going to share the winnings with you. And lo and behold, he did. And he actually split the winnings with her, and he was recognized at the Kennedy Center and so forth. But she utilized that money to pay for a semester abroad, learning in Spain, I believe it was. So I thought that was just a great story to share, great connections. So I thought folks would be happy to hear that. And I hate to highlight one new hire over another, but I just thought that was real important to share.
Jim, you're muted.
It's another great Lake Orion story. So thank you for sharing, Rick. Moving on, Superintendent Evaluation Committee report. There's no report this evening, but I would say that in our work in the coming days, we'll begin to formulate our plan for how we're going to approach evaluation and start to build that process out. And more will be discussed in our workshop on September 15th. So we'll look forward to that. Moving on to business and finance.
Jim?
Yes.
Jim, I just had a question. Rick normally is in the area of pupil accounting, and I'm not putting you on the spot, Rick, but can you give some updates because the number, is there any update, or if there isn't, can you bring to the next meeting because the number of students.
Yeah, I debated whether to talk
so.
about that tonight or not, just because of the unusual times we're in. People, when they leave us, don't typically inform us. We find out through a records request from wherever it is they're going to. If people choose to homeschool, which through this current time, we may have individuals who choose that option. We don't get any information because there is no records request. So I was a little hesitant. I really wanted to to use an old term in pupil accounting, wait to see the whites of their eyes to see who really is engaged in that first week or so. But I can give you a little hint that at our lower elementary grade levels, more in particular our kindergarten, we are seeing a significant number of students who are not following through with enrollment, especially in kindergarten. Our kindergarten number is significantly lower than we had hoped, than we had anticipated. Some of the feedback that we're getting through Pupil Accounting and through some informal conversations is folks are really just comfortable with extending that start time for their child and not having the first experience of their educational career be in this current setting. And they're looking at this as, you know what, if we start them a year from now, there's no harm, no foul, but I really don't feel comfortable with my child having this as their very first experience. Others, we are hearing that remote at that age level just does not meet their needs. And so they intend to continue with their childcare. And then once we get into a face-to-face setting, they will consider then enrolling at that time. So that is one area that I can touch on. It's down significantly. But once we have a better idea of who truly is going to participate in the programming, I just didn't feel it would be appropriate to give you a number that I had to retract at a later date.
And I appreciate that, and that's what I wanted to make sure is I wasn't looking for a number as much, just to get an update, because it is and you did, and I thank you for your update, because you answered and explained the situation that we're facing, that we won't know until you see the whites of their eyes. Yeah.
All set?
Thank you.
Jake, is that good? Great, thank you. Thank you, Rick. Okay, so we'll move on to business and finance. Jen.
This past Monday, the state ran another conference. It's known as the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference. They typically run those in January and May. And it's really a grouping of individuals from the Senate fiscal side, the governor's side, and the House side. And it's really sitting down looking at what revenues actually have come in and projecting forward so they can have a number to start planning budgets. The way this year's gone, they decided to add a third one this past year, and that just occurred this past Monday, an August version, which was really quite a insightful move on their part, because the numbers have changed dramatically, and I'll give you a quick overview of what I mean. With respect to the actual conference and revenue conference that occurred on Monday, the May conference projected a decline in revenue in the school aid fund in the $1.2 billion neighborhood as compared to the January conference. So what I'll be speaking to now is the difference between May compared to January and this August one compared to January, this past January. So the August one here, in the same projection, doing the same analysis, is now projecting a decline in the school aid fund of just $200 million. Not 1.2 billion, just 200 million. It's a $1 billion improvement in 4 months. The reasons behind it, or at least the reasons they gave, which makes sense, two major income streams or tax streams that feed the school aid fund. There are multiple, but there's two dominant ones. That being the income tax. Typically, in a situation where this state slides into recession, think back to 2008, 9, and 10. As soon as the recession starts occurring, layoffs start occurring, decline in output and all those things occur. It's a pretty, at the time, up until this time around, it was a pretty solid correlation between, if the economy is going down and employment's going down, sales tax will go down, income tax withholding will go down. This time around, because the federal government had put in place so many income supports, income tax withholding actually went up, quite a ways up, and then sales tax as well shot up. The sales tax to me was kind of interesting under the circumstances that the state's operating, and this is a little unique to Michigan relative to the rest of the country, because we're operating for a long period of time under the shutdown mode, and particularly a lot of services are not being allowed to go on. Gyms, theaters, things like that. Types of services that don't generate sales tax. Well, people are taking the money, in which whether it's coming via the income supports provided by the federal government or their regular income from working at home, and they're going out and they're buying things that are generating sales tax, such as RVs. They're doing home remodeling. a lot of different activities that are generating sales tax. So in that regard, this meeting has, in terms of the numbers talked about, was a great improvement. Now that said, there's still a material deficit or decline in the school aid fund. The last good piece of interesting news, though, relative to the year we're in now, fiscal 21, is that they will be rolling in $1,038 million surplus from the school aid fund from fiscal 20. So as this was all going on in fiscal 20, when the governor was negotiating with the legislature and everybody was putting the rainy day fund money in, things of that nature, they overshot. So there's $1 billion rolling forward to fiscal 21 in the school aid world. So based on static spending from last year, before the cut in foundation, the school aid fund is projected to have about a $372 million surplus at the end of this year, based on this front round of the early numbers. And that does address a flat funding ratio. On our school district's perspective, we can plan on an $8,529 foundation allowance. The open issue is that the general fund didn't fare so well. They've got a big hole, so the speculation is that any projected fiscal 21 surplus will end up being moved back to the general fund, so there won't be any additional money, and likely we'll probably see some sort of cuts along the way as well. The good news is, two pieces of good news to take out of this is that the expected $600 per pupil cut hitting last year, they minimized that to $175 per pupil cut. So from a Lake Orion point of view, we were looking and planning on the neighborhood of a $3.5 to $4 million operating deficit. I do not have that in front of me right now, unfortunately, but it's landing in the neighborhood of $1 million operating deficit as we're moving through the audit. So that's good news in terms of the protection of our fund balance. It's taking a hit, but it's not nearly what could have happened. As we move into this year, because of all the unknowns, as you know, the state has not completed its budget yet. By law, it's got to be done by the end of September. So the way things have been going, I fully expect for them to be passing a budget at 11:59 p.m. on September 30th. And if things hold to the more optimistic set of numbers, we'll still have a deficit problem to deal with this year, but the scale of it has been materially reduced relative to what it could have been. So from my perspective, I think it's one of the first times in my career where I'm seeing an operating deficit of still a material situation in terms of our cost pressures, but somehow I'm seeing that as being optimistically and a good thing relative to where it could have been. So, and the other big thing that's still hanging out there that's going to impact the state is that the state literally this week came to a settlement on the Flint water situation. So that's another $600 million that the state's general fund's obligated to do. So depending upon how they handle that, if they want to try to settle it all this year, it's another $600 million hit to the general fund side. So that'll change the balance of cost pressures again. So things are looking better than they were originally. We still have our challenges, I guess, just to sum it up, but things are looking a little bit better.
Thank you, Jen. Questions for Jen? Yes, Jake.
Oh, the CARES money that we get that we got, and we're talking about, and we did mention that some of that might be used for the devices. Which fiscal year did that money hit? In our school, in our year that ended June 30th, or our year that we're currently in?
The answer to that really is both. There was a small line item piece that was recognized as of June 30th. The main money, the $350 per pupil, is recognizing in the current fiscal year. So that's about $2.5 million that we're recognizing in the year we're in now. So
is that $350 part of our 8529, the per pupil balance, or is that $2.5 million additional to what we would have otherwise expected?
That's additional. So think of it in terms of grants, though. Typically a grant is there's new money, but with a new set of expenses on top of it. So it'll be operating here, a little bit outside of our normal school operations. So we still have normal school operations challenges, but we do have the advantage of utilizing the CARES grant to tackle a lot of things that otherwise we would have had to pull out of our general fund, making that problem worse. Now, there's a slight difference with the CARES money relative to, like, say, the IDEA grant or even title grants. The CARES money's time frame is basically March, beginning or middle of March to the end of December. And they're allowing us to, if there's some costs that occurred in our last fiscal year, they're allowing us to use those in terms of the money we're just talking about that just is being recognized this year. So one way or another, the district will more than use up that $2.5 million. We were just talking earlier today about, from a planning point of view, there's several different ideas going in different sections. The idea being get everybody in the same room here very soon. Once we actually get the official list of allowable costs for it, and then develop the game plan for handling the spending of that money on, what tasks, what projects, what equipment, things of that nature. The state has yet to publish what the allowable expenses are. It's been, from day one, it's been talked about from a big picture point of view. If you're doing something different because of COVID world, then that will qualify. But from an actual handling and expensing the appropriate way of the money, we're actually going to also hand us a list of, by the way, these are the allowable expenses. So as much as we may interpret something as being it should be covered, we may be limited by what the specifics will be. And that's yet to come. Hopefully this week, I was talking with the state, hopefully this week they're going to get it out.
Good, thank you.
Other questions for John?
Thank you.
John, I did have one question. Was there any speculation in the estimating conference regarding projections of diverting school aid fund money to the higher ed?
That is one of the, yes, it was. There was some speculation being talked about in terms of during the conference itself, they weren't. There was also a follow-up discussion yesterday with Catherine Sumners from the Senate Fiscal Agency. And from her perspective, she doesn't know, and actually legally can't divulge if she did know any specific budget-related discussions going on. But her speculation is, from a consulting point of view, that because the school aid fund, of course, is doing better than the general fund, that, and one of the issues is that they did cut, they cut higher ed last year as well.
Right.
So she suspects whether it's going to be the Flint water issue, addressing the existing deficits in the general fund, or the higher ed piece driving that will be more than likely part of the overall settlement. So, and I think she was doing that intentionally to lower expectations from the point of view of the school aid fund on its own, considering the circumstances, is doing pretty good. But legislature doesn't see it as a standalone fund. They see it all as one fungible pot of money.
Right. It's likely a backdoor method to ease some pressure on the general fund.
Absolutely.
For the higher ed side.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Jen?
I've got one.
Yes, please.
I debated bringing this up with you. It's an article that I read in Cranes on Sunday, and it's circulated with some board members from other districts. But there's this terrible rumor about the legislature salivating over the $2.8 billion sitting in school districts' fund balances across the state, and to talk about forcing us to use that with all these budget deficit talks. So have you heard anything about that? Are there legs to that?
Yes, there are legs to it, and do not be surprised if you see some bills dropping in the near future that address something similar along those lines. So as the general fund pressure builds, it's a source of revenue they'd like to get to. I've talked to a couple of people the last maybe 10 days about it, and it's on everybody's radar screen in terms of, and when I say everybody, I mean the legislative members as well as those of us downstream. So we're trying to work with the issue, for lack of a better way to describe how to attempt to deal with something like that. So yes, that's on the radar screen.
Well, thank you for that. I'm sorry to hear it, and I'm hoping that we can advocate strongly against that.
There's a lot of pushback been going on in the last 10 days or so.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the Finance Committee report. Jake?
I do believe there is no report.
There is no report.
The audit
Thank you.
was at the last one, so.
Correct. All right, thank you. Facilities Liaison report. Scott, do you have anything from Wes and from today?
Well, I think Steve was the only one that didn't have the opportunity to come out. We miss you, Steve, but totally understand. It was great to see. It was great to be at the facilities while the work was happening. The construction folks were there, and the superintendents were at each site. So we got the opportunity to meet them and to actually see the progress of the projects. Beautiful, the beautiful finishes, the great craftsmanship. I mean, kudos. It's great to see from what we were going through 2 years ago with, identifying needs to actually seeing new flooring down the hallways. So we did not have an actual facilities liaison meeting, but I think that On TV is also they're going to be putting out something because he was following us today through the tour. So stay tuned, as well as Mark was taking a lot of pictures. So I'm sure the public will have a good opportunity to see what we saw today.
Great. Thank you, Scott. So we'll move on to action items, and may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the following consent agenda items. Approve minutes from the August 12th, 2020 regular and August 18th, 2020 policy committee meetings.
Is there support?
I support that.
Thank you. Julie?
Ms. Burchart,
Yes.
Mr. Butke,
Yes.
Mr. Dracos,
Yes.
Ms. McQuiston,
Yes.
Mr. Singer,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Weedman.
Yes. Motion to approve the consent agenda passes. We'll move on to I think we need to include those other items in there, don't we, Birgit? Items 2 and 3.
Did I miss something?
No, it's my mistake. So may I have a motion to approve the Oakland County School Board Association 2020 bylaws amendments?
I move that we approve the proposed amendments to the 2020 Oakland County School Board Association bylaws as presented.
Is there support?
Support.
Thank you. Julie?
Ms. Burchart,
Yes.
Mr. Butke,
Yes.
Mr. Dracos,
Yes.
Ms. McQuiston,
Yes.
Mr. Singer,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Weedman.
Yes. Motion to approve the Oakland County School Board Association 2020 bylaws amendments is approved. May I have a motion to approve the certified new hires?
I move that we approve the 3 certified new hires as presented.
Is there support?
Support.
Thank you. Julie, please.
Mrs. Burchart,
Yes.
Mr. Butke,
Yes.
Mr. Dracos,
Yes.
McQuiston,
Yes.
Mr. Singer,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mr. Weedman.
Yes. Motion to approve the certified new hires is approved. And we'd like to welcome Sarah, Julie, and Terry. And we're looking forward to seeing you sometime in the very near future. Welcome. All right. So we'll move on to recap and next steps, and we'll hear from Ben. You're muted, Ben.
All right. What I had said is I will do the recap this time. rather than my closing comments. But so we will be working to develop parent communication about athletics and the spectator restrictions for the fall season. Certainly, we will be working to give a return to school update at upcoming meetings. And then also we will continue to share plans for the special education service delivery as they are developed. And we will also check to see if the new law firm needs board approval.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. And then closing comments. Rick, you want to lead us off?
I have nothing further to add other than just to welcome our new employees. And actually
Great.
welcome back everybody next week.
That's right. Here we go. Thank you. Jen?
Also welcome new employees and welcome everybody back.
Thank you. Heidi?
And I will say ditto. And one thing that I forgot to mention is the insurance that will, the insurance information that parents can purchase for their one-to-one device will be coming out tomorrow. So just so that everybody is aware, that's been a little bit delayed. We've been working on some details. So Mark will be sure to get that out tomorrow so that everybody can watch for that.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. Ben?
Thank you. I just wanted to, thank the community for passing the bond, and I really look forward to the community and the students getting back into the buildings and being proud of what it is that they agreed to move forward with. As far as board members, I also wanted to say thank you for the feedback. All of this discussion we've been having about the opening has been really important for us to understand, how we can problem solve some of the situations that are arising. But I really appreciate the communication that has been happening in between board meetings to help serve our students. Want to recognize, obviously, the new hires and all of our staff coming back next week. I've been here about 5 weeks, and I've just been incredibly impressed with the amazing team that we have that I've met so far, and know all the work that's happening in the background, and people are really doing a great job, and I'm really looking forward to a great experience in the fall. And again, thank you to On TV for joining us today, not only for us, but really to celebrate and help the community be there and see the things that they help come to fruition. So thank you for that. And I look forward to a great school year with our students.
Thanks, Ben. Nate?
Yeah, in the work that I get to do in my job, I get to work with and see some of the best, biggest, most successful companies in the U.S. and the world. One of the things that they've been doing consistently through COVID is focusing on their workplace, making sure their employees are safe and able to work, and then focusing on the core work that they do, the ability to do their job and the thing they bring to the world. But what the best are also doing is keeping their head up and looking at what's the next thing, what happens when we come out of COVID. This is a moment in time. It sure feels like a really long moment in time, but it is. And, having the chance today to walk through the buildings and see not only the work that the team has done to keep employees and students safe, but do the core job of educating, but also have the energy and the foresight to keep our head up and look down the road at what's next. And Jim, you complimented Heidi, which is absolutely well-deserved. And you were gracious, Heidi and Sharon. It was a team effort. Also, thanks to Wes and the team. It's just awesome to see those three things that happen that the best companies are doing. And I think they could learn a lot from how Lake Orion does it, to not only take care of the moment, but also have the energy and the foresight to keep our head up and looking down the road. And it's a real shame that the community doesn't get to see that yet, but boy, when they do, it's awesome stuff. So compliments, it was an awesome day.
Thank you, Nate. Steve.
Thank you, Jim. Director of the Lamp of Learning, I received a check for the Lamp of Learning. I'll hand deliver it to Julie Okel. A lot of talk about sports today, but education comes first, and looking forward to helping the Lamp of Learning next year. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Steve. Scott?
I'd just like to thank Ben and the cabinet for, I know that we're dealing with a moving target here and a moving plan that's updating daily. And I appreciate the amount and the depth of communication that we are receiving as a board, and truly feel like, you know, we are in on some of the decision making, at least to have a good 30,000 foot view to understand truly, so we can explain it to our constituents. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Scott. Birgit?
There we go. Thank you. I concur with everyone about the field trip that we got to take to our building sites today. It was really exciting. I'm grateful it didn't rain on us, but to have been a part of the campaign for it, to see the work being fleshed out in the plans, and then to see it in person was just something to behold. I just kept thinking about our community and being thankful for all their work and providing that for us. And I'm so excited for people to be able to get to see it. Like Nate was saying, it's a sight to behold. It's very exciting. I do want to say, Ben, I'm really impressed with all that you've been doing and with your 90-day plan and all the connections you've been making. I'm really proud of the work that you're doing, and to what you're doing for us in these times of a pandemic with the cabinet. Your hard work is not unnoticed. You are very appreciated. I'm glad you're here doing it. I want to welcome our new staff, and I want to apologize to Terry Fassel because that's not her name. It's Taylor Facile. Yeah, Taylor, well, we welcome you. She was an amazing student, and we're excited to have all of these new hires on board. Thank you.
Jake?
Yeah, this is the last meeting we'll have before school starts. So when we have our next meeting, the students will be back. So even though it's a strange time for students to go back, this is gear up time. You know, it's going to be Labor Day weekend in about 10 days. And then it's back to school in a different form, but it's back to school. So looking forward to seeing the kids come back, and appreciate all of the staff. And I do want to, that's coming back. I do want to take special time to say there are, as Ben alluded to, there are many staff members who won't be coming back because of the differences. And I want to let those dragons know that they're in our thoughts, and we want the schools to open back up because we want all of our employees to go back, because I consider every single one of our employees to be an educator. That if you're a bus driver, a staff associate, you're there impacting kids' lives, and we want you to get back to the thing that you do so well. So looking forward to this school year starting and getting back to normal as soon as possible.
All right, thank you, Jake. Mary Jo?
Thanks, Jim. First, thanks to everybody who put together our field trip today. As a person who has not been involved in every step of the process with the bond election and all of that, and having not been in buildings for a while, to see the transformations that are taking place is just amazing. And like I said, from someone who hasn't been at every step of the process, I think parents, when you get to see what's going on in those buildings and the transformations, I think you'll be quite pleased, and we appreciate you supporting that through your votes. Ben, kudos to you. I'm a data girl, so when you talk about data, it just warms my heart. So I just want you to know, and all of Cabinet, that as we move forward, just based upon the things that you said tonight, Ben, about how you look at the rolling numbers and how it's changing and you're keeping track of that, really does my brain good, because I know that we're going to have sufficient data to make a very good choice when we have to decide when students are going to come back. So I appreciate that very much. Welcome back to the staff and to the new hires. Welcome to the district. For those of you who haven't been dragons before, you're going to love being a dragon. And finally, I started teaching last week online for the first time in my life. And so I want to say something to the teachers and to the parents. Keep breathing. There will be glitches. Your blood pressure likely will go up once or twice, if not many times. It's okay. Things will smooth out. You'll get into a groove. And the one last thing I want to say to the teachers is, even though you're not going to be physically present with your students, you can still impact them in a really positive way. So I know that you'll do that because all Dragon staff does that. So I appreciate every one of you.
Thank you, Mary Jo. And finally, I'd like to thank Rick and Chris for their work, Chris Bell, for their work on making our students safe in that first wave of students coming back to school in the form of athletics and marching band, and look forward to what we've learned on that to help hasten the process to get all of our students back in school face-to-face, live in our new buildings, and get the year started in person as quickly as it's feasible to do so. And so what we've learned off of that will be very valuable, and hopefully we can use that as a tool to hasten that process to see all of our students back in school. On that note, thank you, board. Thank you, administration. Meeting's adjourned. Good night.